And these reasons are going to be given to you from the perspective of an applicant attorney. So it might not be an actual complete discussion of the topic because we don't have the perspective of a defense attorney, but it's quite a bit what we do have, and it gives quite a bit of insight as to what goes on behind the scenes that we as doctors aren't really exposed to. So I think it's going to be an eye-opening for you. Now, when it comes to deposition, depositions are discussed in the Labor Code, and specifically for our purposes, CCR Chapter 4.5, Subchapter 2, Article 10.7.27 talks about medical examiners' cross-examination. And I want to read from this code. It says, quote, "The Workers' Compensation Appeals Board favors cross-examination of medical witnesses by way of deposition." I'm going to say that again. The WCAB, the Workers' Compensation Appeals Board, favors cross-examination of medical witnesses by way of deposition. Well, what would be the alternative to that? The alternative to that would be by way of face-to-face cross-examination in front of a judge. That would be quite cumbersome, quite bulky, and would be cost prohibitive. So whenever possible, not to say that you'll never be called before a Workers' Compensation Appeals Board judge, but the WCAB favors, whenever possible, cross-examination of medical witnesses by way of deposition. So if you need to be cross-examined, if additional opinions need to be sought, or if the record needs to be further developed, your cross-examination will typically be taken by way of deposition. So you are going to be deposed. If you haven't yet been, you certainly will be in the future. Further, reading from this section 107.27, it states that reasonable costs in connection with such deposition shall be allowed under Labor Code section 4621, which we'll discuss shortly. Now, deposition testimony, also known as medical legal testimony, qualifies as a medical legal expense, just as producing your medical legal report qualifies as a medical legal expense. And medical legal expenses are paid for through the medical legal fee schedule. And I'll give you the fee schedule for deposition testimony in just a minute. Reading from the same subchapter, this time Article 56 discusses medical legal expense. Section G states that, quote, medical legal expense, unquote, means any costs or expenses incurred by or on behalf of any party or parties, on behalf of the administrative director or the appeals board, for x-rays, laboratory fees, other diagnostic tests, medical reports, medical records, medical testimony, and as needed interpreters' fees for the purpose of proving or disproving a contested claim. So medical testimony qualifies as a medical legal expense, just as do your medical reports, just as do your charges for x-rays, just as do charges for laboratory fees, interpreter services, etc. So medical testimony is a medical legal procedure, and it's paid for under the medical legal fee schedule. Continuing, next section, medical legal testimony. Let's put that in quotes. Quote, medical legal testimony, unquote, means expert testimony provided by a physician at a deposition or a Workers' Compensation Appeals Board hearing regarding the medical opinions submitted by the physician. So this tells us the need for a deposition right here. It says that it's your expert testimony provided by you. You're a physician. It's your expert testimony regarding the medical opinion that you submitted. So you might ask yourself, well, what is the reason I'm having my deposition taken? Well, it regards your medical opinion. If you go back to your report and you look at the opinions and the conclusions that you submitted, there are either omissions, errors, inconclusive opinions, unsupported opinions. There are remaining questions regarding your medical opinion that then requires your expert testimony. And like I said before, most of your expert testimony is going to be given by way of deposition, although there may be times when you will have to go to a board hearing, but the majority will be at deposition. I myself have never been to a workers' compensation appeals board hearing, although I have had my deposition taken over 100 times. Medical legal testimony is paid for under the medical legal fee schedule. The medical legal fee schedule is governed by CCR 9795, and I'm sure you all have a copy of that. Regarding medical legal testimony, I have provided a copy of this code in your handout materials. Specifically, medical legal testimony is charged and paid for under the billing code ML105. And the definition of the ML105 code is as follows, and this is directly word for word off of CCR 9795. If you scroll down to the code ML105, it describes fees for medical legal testimony. The physician shall be reimbursed at the rate of RV5 or his or her usual and customary fee, whichever is less, for each quarter hour or portion thereof, rounded to the nearest quarter hour, spent by the physician. Now this is important. The physician shall be entitled to fees for all itemized, reasonable, and necessary time spent related to the testimony, including reasonable preparation time and travel time. The physician shall be paid a minimum of 1 hour for a scheduled deposition. So if you go to a deposition and it lasts only 20 minutes, you still get paid for 1 hour for the deposition minimum. But also you are allowed to charge and get paid for your reasonable preparation time and your travel time, and that includes travel time both to the deposition and travel time from the deposition. Also, if you are the AME or the agreed panel QME on the case and you're called to deposition, of course the ML10 fee medical legal code would be modified by the 1.25 modifier to allow for increased charges for either the AME or the agreed panel QME. And in your handout materials, I've given you a template that you can use to track your deposition time. It allows you to track your time involved with preparing for the deposition before the deposition. In other words, your review of any pertinent medical records, diagnostic studies, your reports and supplemental reports. It includes an area for you to document your time in travel, both to and from the deposition. It allows you to track and document your time face-to-face at the deposition. And then if there are any additional services involved, such as a review of the deposition transcript, or, for example, producing a report if there are errors found in the deposition transcript, this template allows you to document all your time so that you can appropriately document any billing that you submit for the deposition.